I'll start the recording and I'll start my presentation, which I hope you're able to see. But yeah, so welcome everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you're joining from. So my name is Dario. I'm a project manager at the National Board of Trade Sweden, and today we're here to talk about the agritech sector in Sweden and opportunities for international suppliers from low and middle income countries. So just a quick run through the agenda. I'll talk you through the National Board of Trade Sweden, which is my organization, and OTGS, which is the service within the organization. And then Jenny will talk us through the upcoming the study that will be published shortly on our website, and she'll present the study and give you some highlights from the research. And then we have an excellent panel of experts within the sector that will be questioned about the sector and share their expertise and knowledge. And then at the end, you, the audience, have the opportunity to ask your questions, and you can. The chat is being monitored, so do feel free to sound off in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. And this webinar will take around 50 minutes. And if you cannot stay with us for that long, worry not, because the webinar will be recorded and we'll share the presentation afterwards in due time. So just really briefly about the National Board of Trade Sweden, or Kommerskollegium in Swedish. It's a public agency and of Sweden, and our mission, just very shortly, is to work for free and open trade with transparent rules and free movement within the EU internal market. We are quite an old agency. We were founded in 1651. There is some controversy as to which is the oldest public agency in Sweden, but we're definitely up there in the top three. And so we are what in Sweden you will call an expert authority, and our job is to support the Ministry of Foreign Affairs with policy recommendations, analysis. We work also with trade and development cooperation, and I'll go into that in a moment. And also, since this year, we have also gotten the mandate to look at securing essential trade within the broader civil defense realm. And so this is the overview of our services. So we do quite a lot. What I will be focusing on today, and for the purpose of this webinar, is the development cooperation. And the idea of the department is to, in a nutshell, improve conditions for low middle income countries to participate in global trade in a sustainable manner. And this is just a snapshot of the geographical breadth of our work. This is an ever-evolving picture, but right now we are pretty much on every side of the globe, as you see in the picture, and we work with our partner countries in different projects and through different initiatives. And so today I'm representing the National Board of Trade, but more specifically Open Trade Sweden, in short OTGS. And OTGS is a service that we offer to support companies in low and middle income countries to export to Sweden and the EU at large. And we do a breadth of services, information sharing, with training, coaching, matchmaking. So in short, our ambition is to help companies become ready to export to the Swedish market and build relationships that can last throughout time. And so this webinar is part of our contact point, if you will. The contact point is mandated with providing free information on regulations, standards, by requirements for coming into Sweden as a foreign company. And we also do webinars and reports. This is an excellent example of that. And we also have a digital export guide, Road to Export, that is meant to help first-time exporters to get acquainted with the instruments and tools and the language of exporting. And so we've been around for 20 years, and we have provided advice to thousands of companies. We have come in touch with companies from literally across the globe through across a variety of sectors. And our goal is to obviously establish long-term relationships with those companies. And right now, I'll focus on the three main sector areas that we work with. So we are active in tech, textile, and food. And what we do is obviously we do information sharing training, but we also have a more, I guess, proactive approach when it comes to these three sectors. And we bring companies to trade fairs in Sweden, but also abroad to facilitate their coming in contact with the relevant buyers, both Swedish and European. And this is an example, Textile Sweden, of I would say a flagship program. And so Textile Sweden is a structured market entry program for IT companies from Moldova and Ukraine. It's quite a long program. We just started the second edition of the program in January this year, so just a few weeks ago, and it will span until March 2027. And the goals is for the companies that are part of our program to essentially build the muscles to um, be able to build sustainable long-term business deals on the Swedish market. And this is just that's a lot of information here. We don't have to go through all of this, but just a little bit of the phases that build the program. So yeah, we started in December 2025 with the recruitment, and now we are around phase one. So the companies are about to come to Stockholm in a couple of weeks' time for a really big tech show. And the pillars of this program is obviously training, mentoring, and then a lot of networking. And this is just a picture that I wanted to share. Was a quite happy moment from last year's program when we brought a number of companies from Ukraine and Moldova to Sweden, and specifically Elmia Subcontractor, which is the Nordics' biggest trade show for the manufacturing sector. And we brought companies there, and they got to meet this young gentleman there, which is the Minister for International Development, Cooperation and Foreign Trade, Benjamin Dusa. So about the Swedish market, obviously we work with tech at large, and agritech is part of our effort, and you'll be able to access the report that will be released shortly on our website. And in the meantime, we have a variety of reports available that cover the IT market at large, fintech, medtech, gaming. So do have a look at our studies on our website. And so, yeah, that was my really brief presentation. And now I will stop sharing my screen, and I will invite my colleague Jenny, that she will guide us through the study that will be released about the agritech sector. So, Jenny, when you're ready, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dario. I will start sharing my screen. I hope you can see it now.
It's coming up. Wonderful, yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Welcome for joining, everyone. My name is Jenny, and I am today presenting you this market study of the findings from the agri-tech market in Sweden. So our goal today is to support you, the companies who have solutions within the agri-tech market from low and middle income countries, to understand the Swedish market, how it works, where opportunities exist, but also how to successfully enter this ecosystem. So agritech sits at the intersection of agriculture and technology, and it includes both products and services. It covers solutions that improve efficiency, sustainability, and resilience in farming through digital tools, but also automation and data-driven processes. While we in the study primarily focus on services, the Swedish agritech sector also combines products with these services. And the balance depends a bit on how the market is structured. The most relevant areas and goals for the Swedish agritech developments include sustainability and climate impact, but also precision farming and digitalization, automation and robotics, data integration and traceability, Also, resilient food systems is an important part. This is for securing long-term food supply and adapting to changing consumer needs. And lastly, global competitiveness, so strengthening Sweden's position as a leader in agricultural innovation. A bit more about the agricultural landscape. We see that less than 10% of Sweden's land area is used for agriculture. Nearly half of that faces natural constraints. Some of them are poor soil quality or short growing seasons. We have quite long winters and short summers. With about 70% of the country is covered by forests, and this scarcity drives the need for technologies that maximize productivity per hectare, such as precision farming, but also controlled environment agriculture. We also see advanced crop monitoring systems. Swedish agriculture is highly fragmented, and nowadays we have about 55,000 farms spread across vast rural areas, mainly in southern Sweden. I will show more on that in the next slide. The geographical spread increases logistic complexity and makes digital coordination tools essential for planning, production, and distribution. Higher average temperatures and milder winters extend the growing season and enable heat-demanding crops to thrive further up north. And overall, climate change is reshaping the Swedish agriculture. This is not only a challenge, but also opening new doors for crops and creating both opportunities and challenges for the future. These factors push demand for precision farming, automation and digital tools, as previously named, but also climate-smart technologies. In Sweden, we operate in the agricultural sector under the Nordic conditions with limited crop diversity and a strong focus on dairy and bovine meat, which together account for about 1/3 of the production value. Crop production represents roughly 40%, and pig, poultry, and horticulture make up to about 30%. And overall, the primary sector contributes less than 1% to Sweden's GDP. So Sweden's agricultural sector is characterized by quite large-scale farms in the arable and vegetable segments, concentrated in southern Sweden. And we point out regions as Västra Götaland, Skåne, and Östergötland County. Short growing seasons with long summer days, like many daylight hours during summer, but also aging in the sector and labor shortages create operational pressure. These structural factors make efficiency and automation attractive, but adoption is shaped by cultural, financial, and regulatory dynamics. Structural and environmental challenges have driven the need for innovation, and this lays in the foundation for agritech solutions, who are aimed at improving sustainability, efficiency, and also resilience in Swedish farming. Building on this structural overview, it's essential to highlight the organizations driving innovation in response to these challenges. Among them, AgTech Sweden serves as a national platform consisting of several different organizations who are dedicated to accelerating the digital and sustainable transformation of Swedish agriculture. Its mission is closely tied to three overarching objectives. The first one is securing long-term food supply and meeting evolving customer needs by fostering innovation that strengthens production systems and adapts to changing market demands. Secondly, reducing negative environmental impact and contribute positively to ecosystems through solutions that enhance carbon sequestration, promote biodiversity, and support climate-smart farming practices. And lastly, increase Sweden's international competitiveness for both agricultural producers and technology companies by enabling scalable innovations and positioning Swedish agritech as a global leader. So ongoing consolidation in Swedish agriculture is characterized, as said before, by the larger but fewer farms, meaning that the market is driven by value and performance rather than volume. So this results in a customer base with high expectations, but also larger deal size and a strong focus on quality and measurable outcomes. So the total number of agricultural companies with arable land has decreased from nearly 76,000 in 2005 to slightly less than 55,000 last year. That's a decrease in number of companies of 28% over the past 20 years. At the same time, advanced agritech solutions, including automation and data-driven tools, are no longer optional but essential for maintaining competitiveness. So focusing on opportunities. The market offers selective but clear opportunities for external service providers, particularly for those that deliver interoperable, labor-saving, and sustainability-driven solutions. Successful market entry depends less on novel technology alone and more on strong local partnerships. System compatibility, but also reliable after-sales services tailored to a consolidated and highly professionalized farming sector. In our interviews, collaboration is strongly underlined. You will read that more in the report whenever it's published. But collaborating and continuously getting insights from your end users about developments are very relevant for the agritech market. Then more about business culture and decision making. The Swedish business culture is built on trust, transparency, and consensus, which means decisions are made through careful evaluation rather than persuasive or aggressive sales tactics. Clear communication and evidence-based claims are expected, and aggressive selling tactics typically backfires. So farmers and agribusinesses rely heavily on verified results and proven references before adapting new solutions. Credibility, real-world case studies, and a strong partner ecosystem are essential to build confidence. Technology adoption also depends on compatibility with existing systems, whether that involves machinery, data flows, or digital platforms. Integration is often non-negotiable, and solutions that create friction are quickly dismissed. Local presence is another decisive factor, as Swedish customers expect reliable, accessible support, which is why partnering with a reseller or distributor or strong service provider significantly increases market acceptance and long-term success. Overall, success in Sweden depends on building long-term value, aligning with local expectations, and demonstrating that your solution fits seamlessly into the broader agricultural ecosystem. So this visualization illustrates a generalized view of the Swedish agritech market, placing farmers and growers at the center as primary stakeholders. Around them, we show two layers. The second one, the yellow layer, consists of local actors. Examples are cooperatives, dealers, and service networks that farmers rely on for buying machinery, inputs on knowledge, advisory services, and technical support. Examples of those are Lantmännen i Maskin, Swedish Agro, and Södra Hag, as well as farmers' unions such as LRF and the regional service providers. These are very important in a trust relation with the farmers, as well as local market knowledge, specifically for Sweden. Dominant players in the market and high switching costs can create major entry barriers for newcomers. It's not recommended to enter the Swedish agritech market by bypassing this layer. And in the outer circle, we see solution providers, both Swedish and international companies delivering and producing technologies and tools. Then key hurdles for adoption and barriers you must plan for. And higher upfront investment. Autonomous solution promise lower cost per hectare over time, but initial capital requirements remain a barrier. Complex subsidy frameworks. This is mainly because sustainability is a policy priority, subsidy processes often are quite slow, delaying technology uptake. About the financial climate, global uncertainty and tight farm sector margins reduce willingness to invest, even when return on investment is favorable. And skepticism about new technologies or methods, a convergence of economic insecurity and technological uncertainty, where digitalization, through promising resilience, though promising introducing new dependencies and risks that feel magnified during crisis. Farmers perceive vulnerability not only in operational terms, such as cyber threats or cost burdens, but also in social and psychological dimensions, such as loss of autonomy and trust. Bridging a gap between research and market entry, so making the theory work in practice. It's not always as easy as it seems by the book. Companies try and fail before succeeding. Some actors survive and some won't. In the next 3 to 5 years, we expect to see more autonomous vehicles, lower cost systems, and stronger digitalization driven by increased reporting requirements. Magnus, also present in the webinar, highlighted this during one of the interviews for the market study. The requirements are pushing for automation and compliance processes. This also accelerates digitalization across the agricultural sector, and it amplifies the need for reliable, well-structured data flows. As regulations demand more frequent and accurate submissions, farmers and agribusinesses are compelled to adopt digital tools that ensure transparency, efficiency, and interoperability. Development and growth in robotics have been in lower pace since farmers do not want to have machines for only one task or solution, as well as uptime is an important factor. Self-driving is often implemented on existing machines or in parts of the production where robots can work more or less all the time. Other remarkable external factors worth to name influencing the needs of farmers are climate change on agricultural geographies. So temperature-sensitive crops can be produced more up north, but also the increasing adoption of sensors, robotics, and digital solutions in Sweden and across Europe, of course. The evolution from hardware-focused systems to modular API-driven solutions, drawing parallels with fintech, and the growing importance of biological innovations, especially in the role of microbes and biosensor in agriculture, and advances in connectivity enabling new applications and accelerating digital transformation. Then a more simplified version of how agritech is framed in Sweden, and this is of course a summary. First of all, the people who actually buy and use the tools follow most often industry media. So that's where your story needs to show up. But it's also a way to keep yourself updated about the market trends, challenges, and possibilities, of course. Secondly, mainstream and social channels are great, but they're more about big themes like climate, food security, and resilience. That's where you talk about the why, not the product specifically. Thirdly, the policy landscape really drives the conversation. So if you can show how your solution supports compliance, but also sustainability targets, you're a bit ahead of the competition maybe. Fourth, it's important to keep in mind that technology itself doesn't impress anyone anymore. What matters is the impact. So show the return on investment, that it's easy to use and that it works on the farm, preferably with relevant references from the country or region you're launching to. And finally, Swedish farmers are under constant pressure around labor and profitability. So anything that saves time, reduces workload, or strengthens resilience will land well. Exporters of precision farming tech, sensors, autonomous tractors, and AI-driven tools must comply with laws. These are some examples. It depends on what kind of solution you develop and offer. Recommended is to always check into detail with an expert, preferably locally, so an expert in the Swedish market. The following list is just a summarized overview. And as an example, the GDPR, it applies to all farm data that can be linked to individuals. For example, GPS routes, operator IDs. Then we have the machinery regulation, safety requirements for autonomous mobile machinery, such as tractors and robots, and mandatory conformity assessment for high-risk machinery. Digital instructions and cybersecurity provisions. And then trial permits and safety documentation for automated vehicles and robots. Lastly, the EU Data Act, which is effective from September last year, mandates access by design for IoT devices, enabling farmers to share machine data with third parties, for example, service providers. So to sketch a realistic route to market and how it looks in Sweden, the partners and support systems that matters most. So firstly, partners. In Sweden, you rarely enter the market alone. So you will need a local reseller, distributor, maybe have a look at cooperatives, original equipment manufacturers and advisors. They all play a key role in getting you in front of the right farms or end users and making sure your solution fits into existing workflows. These partners already have the trust and the networks, so you tap into that rather than building everything yourself from scratch. Secondly, where to network. So if you want visibility and credibility, for example, agritech Sweden is a central hub, and also universities like SLU, the Swedish Agricultural University. They are fantastic research collaboration for early validation. And the LRF, the Federation of Swedish Farmers, is invaluable when you want to understand the farmers' needs and connect with regional networks. Even LinkedIn as a I won't say traditional, but new media is surprisingly strong here. So Swedish industry experts actively share insights and look for partnerships. Thirdly, the funding landscape. So Sweden has a very generous public and EU-funded ecosystem. There are agencies like Vinnova, Tillväxtverket, and the Swedish Energy Agency programs such as Horizon Europe. Those offer grants that lower risk and help you localize faster. And this is also especially helpful for foreign startups who need that first foothold. Also green finance and impact-driven investors. So there is a strong impact investment scene. Investors like Almi Invest, Norrsken, LRF Ventures, they are actively looking for solutions that combine technology with sustainability, real climate impact, and measurable impact on the farm. A practical entry playbook to start with. First of all, validating demand and positioning through Sweden-specific market research to target just for your solution, target group, and knowing who you compete with or what you will replace. Then choosing an entry model. So either you sell through partners or establish a Swedish entity. A Swedish partner is always recommended, especially to really align with your target group. Ensure legal and regulatory compliance. It depends on what kind of solution you have, of course. So please work together with a local specialist on this. And also localizing marketing materials and emphasize competitive advantages, specifically for this market. So either if it works in your home country, the climate, the user is different in Sweden. Building trust through pilots, references from current users, preferably in the Swedish market, and being ready to deliver local service and support is very important. And building relationships through trade fairs or industry networks. Then let's look at the key takeaways shaping the agritech market in Sweden. First of all, digitalization is a baseline. It's no longer something that differentiates a company. Instead, what really matters is the quality of the data, how well systems interoperate, and how easy your solution is to use. These are the factors that drive adoption. Next, we have sustainability goals. They are steering both demand and regulation. Any solution entering the Swedish market must actively support climate targets, ensure compliance, and simplify reporting. So if you can clearly show how your technology contributes to sustainability metrics, you're speaking the market's language. And we also see that the market is moving toward fewer, larger, and more professional farms. And in this environment, the buyers prioritize value, performance, and reliability. So novelty alone won't get you to the top, unfortunately. Measurable outcomes will, though. And at the same time, real adoption barriers, they remain. So even when the return on investment is strong, farmers and agribusinesses still weigh the implementation effort, the level of service support, and the overall risk before investing. So demonstrating how you reduce friction is crucial. And finally, local market adoption is decisive. So success depends on strong partnerships, deep system compatibility, and trusted support on the ground. And companies that invest in local relationship and local readiness consistently unlock far better traction than those who try to do it all by themselves. So thank you for your attention during the summarized version of the market report presentation. And now I hand over again to Dario for the Q&A with Ansi, Magnus, and Cecilia.
Thank you so much, Jenny. That was an incredibly useful overview, and I think you'll touch upon the some of the most important points that you also will dwell into in depth in the report. So I'll encourage you all to have a look at the report when it comes out. And I realize I have introduced you, Jenny, when I gave the word to you. So now I will take that sort of backwards. So I will. So Jenny Peters is a business growth officer at Food Collective in Stockholm, and she supports both international and Swedish fast-moving consumer goods companies in identifying market opportunities and launching new products. And she has an extensive experience in business development and marketing from working with startups and companies in growth phases. So Jenny was the lead author of the report that will come out shortly on our website. And now, building on the presentation, we'll move on to for the panel discussion. We have about 20 minutes for that. And so I'll introduce our esteemed panelists. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. And so first off, we have Hansi Kroll, and she's a Swedish business development leader with experience in the tech industry. And Hansi specializes in growth strategy, digital platforms, and commercial development. Her background includes work with startups, technology-focused events, and advisory roles. Thank you so much, Hansi, for being here today with us. Now we have Magnus Jeppsson, Senior Advisor in Agritech and Food Systems. He has worked for several decades in digitalization and technology-driven business development. His experience includes senior roles and advisory work with companies such as Yara, Syngenta, and other organizations focused on agriculture and sustainability. Thanks, Magnus, and for being with us today. And then last but not least, Cecilia Tregård. She's an expert in food systems and food tech. She has more than 10 years of experience in international consulting, policy, and ecosystem development. She works with with organizations and innovation partners to support the sustainable transformation of food systems worldwide. Thank you, Cecilia. So now we got a really useful overview by Jenny and the report, but I was thinking we'll have a round of questions to all the panelists, and I'll start with you, Ansi. So we heard a little bit about in the report about the sort of some of the keywords, local presence, partnerships, reliability. But my question to you is the following. So for an international service provider from the agritech sector wanting to come into Sweden, what do you think, we're looking at the first 6 to 12 months. What do you think the steps this company needs to adopt to try to successfully launch itself in Sweden, and what they have to avoid? If you can think of, your top tips.
Yeah, that's a big question and probably has a lot of different answers. I think that one thing that we need to be careful with is agri-tech is such a vast and broad terms. So there are plenty of different types of companies moving into the market. So I think it's important to fully understand where you stand in the ecosystem to fully know how to do your market approach. So I always tell all companies that I work with to do a lot of research to make sure that who do we match with? Who should we partner with? We've heard Jenny say several times that choosing that sort of market entry is really important. If you're going with a partner, if you are going with an operator or something like that. But to be able to do that, you also need to do your research for that. And then also sort of segment carefully, because of the fact that even though Sweden is a small market, there is a lot of differences between like dairy, arable, horticulture, to fully understand the tech that I'm providing, where does that sit in that process? So what do I need to be careful with? I also think it's important on the messaging to fully think about like, how do we put this to market? I've worked with a lot of young startups, and often they get very focused on their own features and what they bring to the table. But it's more important to look at the value, just as Jenny was saying. So really looking at what is the value that it's bringing and make sure that that is then followed up by data. So finding partners in the Swedish ecosystem that helps you do trials, find a farm that will test your products and services to really have something that is very localized when you start approaching a broader market, I think is super important. So very practical terms in what you communicate in what you do. And then also use channels. I think that Jenny was on that in the last couple of slides, and the report goes into this as well, to make sure that you use the channels that is best suited both to your product and service, but also to whom you're trying to reach, and not think about marketing or big campaigns, but really boil it down to the value that you're bringing, because a reference from a fellow farmer is going to stretch a lot further than any marketing campaign will. And then sales, depending on how much you know about the culture in Sweden. So once again, research and study as much as you can on the localization. Fully understand that here it's a lot to do with trust, and that's why those partnerships are so important, to also align that and realize that it does take time to move into the market and gain that trust. But once you're in and you've proven yourself, loyalty between this sector is high. So that is why we also see some of these potential partners having broad market share across the board. So there are a lot of things to think about, but if you research it correctly, you're good to go.
Wonderful. That was a really comprehensive answer. I have jotted down a couple keywords: the messaging, specialization, doing your research, a local reference, pilot. So that was definitely something for us to take on with us from this webinar. And now, Cecilia, over to you. Cecilia, you also featured in the report with some contributions. So we heard in the presentation, also just now from Ansi, about the the reference, the strong reference case you need to have locally to make it into Sweden, and the importance of trust. So, from your perspective, what do you say would make an agritech solution viable in practice in Sweden? The proof points that Swedish customers and partners expect before committing to a partnership with a foreign service provider from the agritech industry.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think I will reiterate a bit about what Jenny said, and also Ansi, obviously. And I think I'd like to start with stressing that the Swedish business culture, getting a grip how it works, is really key here when you're approaching any key stakeholder in this regard. So building trust, as we already touched upon, thinking that you will also cultivate a relationship that will last for a longer term. That's also something that is very valued in Sweden. We also tend to, as also was touched upon, that we make decisions through consensus, but also that we tend to be quite direct in Sweden in the way we communicate. So really try to bear that in mind when you approach key stakeholders, and really point to the benefits of your solution, the value you can bring to the table, and be transparent, even with potential downsides, because I think that will really be something that will carry you further down in the relationship, or strengthen the relationship, basically. And then when I talk to farmers, what they often say is obviously what they look to when they're pondering on investing, is that the investment cost itself is really key for them, obviously. They run on very tight margins in agriculture, the businesses that operate there. So they really need to ponder, well, does this investment make sense to me? Will I get a return on it? Because it is big decisions that they have to make in an economic context. And farmers, as we all know, tend to be very pragmatic. So they want to know that the solutions you're offering, is it really reflecting their reality, the reality they are operating in? Does it answer to the main challenges that you meet at farm level? So that's also something I hear a lot. That's really something they weigh into their decisions. And I think it's also good to know that it's a relatively small sector in Sweden, so word of mouth is important between farmers. If one farmer, I think we touched upon it as well, that if you can get one farmer to test it, then they're very positive about it, and then they can move that message forward to others as well. So I think word of mouth is something that is important, and also big agricultural fairs. That's basically where you see a lot of farmers being present, obviously networking, looking at various solutions, testing, touching. That's really important, and they can discuss pros and cons and move forward in their decision. But then also, it is big investments for many of these businesses, farm businesses. It's not just about the money they invest, it's also about the time. So they need to know that it will be worth their time, that the implementation will be smooth, obviously, that if it's they have already some technology and there's new technology, as we also said, it has to function together. It's a system that you can integrate these systems and that they are interoperable. That's extremely important when I talk to farmers. So really think about how can you facilitate all that. And also there are some tough cases that farmers have gone through where they didn't really get the support. So once they brought in the new technology, perhaps the technology, in many cases, is from another country, but the support is also in that country and in another language. So I know they tell me often that the best thing for them is if they are out on the farm and the system is not working and it's early morning or late night, they want to know that they can call someone, preferably in the local language in Swedish, and get things going quickly, or correct the glitch in the system, because the growing season is very short in Sweden. So if there is a glitch in the system, every day or even hour that they lose is very costly for the farmer. So knowing that they have the support is also really key when they make a decision. And so overall, they value a competent partner that can show the trust, and that they will support them along implementation and post implementation, basically, if something comes up. And when it comes to partners, we talked about resellers and distributors. I guess they looked more into documentation, certifications, the overall value proposition. How can you demonstrate that there have been a successful use of the product or the service, and so on. That's really key there, and obviously that it's compliant, and that's something we saw on Jenny's slide. That in Sweden it's obviously EU and Swedish regulation that regulates the agriculture market. So look into that. Depending on what is required, GDPR, the various data acts, machinery regulation, and also different standards depending on what you're offering. That's also something you will need to demonstrate. So overall, showing that your solution meets quite high, globally high standards in terms of quality and safety.
Thank you, Cecilia. That was really useful. There's a question I want to plug from the audience, and I want to plug into your answer, because you touch upon the importance of relationship building, and you also said Sweden is it might be a big country geographically, but it's not a big market, and the importance of word of mouth. So someone in the chat asked about the avenues where to meet potential customers and partners. Would you say trade fairs are a good avenue in Sweden when it comes to getting the word out about your product and meeting potential partners and customers?
Yes, I would say so, and I think that would also save you as a smaller company a lot of time, because if all the big key players in Sweden are at the same place, then it will be, and if you strategically think about how to use that time at the fair, I think you can get a lot out from it. Really, so that I think would be one of my best advices, honestly.
Thank you. And there's some examples of relevant trade shows in the report. So I had a chance to add a sneak peek into the report. So I'm sharing a lot of information that all of the people attending don't have yet, but so now able to access the report. And now, thank you so much, Cecilia. Now over to Magnus. So I have a question for you on the back of a couple quotes that you share in the report. So obviously we heard from Jenny that the market is heading towards greater digital adoption, and we talked about robotics being integrated into machinery and systems. So when we think about companies that want to enter the agritech market and the entry points for new providers, what do you think is the most realistic entry point for a company when it comes to where do they fit, and also the biggest barrier, if you will, to that?
Yes, of course. I think we need to frame a little bit that we're not talking about robotics, so it's a little bit more narrowed than the discussion has been so far. If you look into the robotics and take my experience in consideration, I would say, even though this is a bold statement, is to try to bundle up with established bigger global companies, outdoor or indoors, because and I do say this with all the respect for a startup. I understand the hurdle this is, and how hard it is to get a pitch in these big companies. But if you get in there, Sweden is a very, very small market. So it takes a lot to gain. Yeah, you have seen Jenny's presentation. It's not a huge amount of hectares if you compare to Argentina. These companies, they normally work with our part of the world as early adapters. We are seen as a country, and especially in the ag, as very, very early adapters, keen to test and look into things. So that's taking with a respect that as a small startup, it's very hard to talk to these guys. But if you have something that's really, really good, they will try to find a good solution. But if that's not possible, and you don't want to get that route, I think, as have been stated both by Jenny and Cecilia, is to bundle up with the digital agtech companies that are around. And you have a very good overview in slide 14 in the PowerPoint. And you will get the report a good list of contact points to work with. And I have the same rationale as said before for this, and that is that the support on farm when needed is the best and highest way to get trust. And I think you mentioned it as reduce friction. I think this is key, and one have to take in consideration a farmer that is using a digital solution or robotic that doesn't provide the service that was pretended will stop. They will not wait to anyone come and help them. They will just take it out of their way, stop it, and do it manually or the old way. And then the eventual result of this is that you will have an even higher threshold to enter that market again. So that's why it's so essential to be on farm, ensure that the service is working well.
Thank you. Yes, I think you said you put the finger on something that was recurring. Where do you provide value? I think that's the be specific about what you can do. I think that's also something that we've seen not only in agritech but across the tech sector at large, especially when it comes to markets like Sweden that are highly digitized. So now we have a few minutes, 8 minutes for taking questions, and there are a lot of questions in the chat, and I'll try to lump them together so that we can just have one or two big questions that but one question I think that could be a good way, just a little bit of food for thought, whether someone is asking, we talked about the agritech and opportunities, but is there really a need for external solutions in Sweden? Is the market already well served by local players? And so that's I think whoever feels they want to answer to this question. So the question is there a need for local external providers for foreign service providers, or is the market already too saturated with local players? I think that's a little bit of a maybe controversial question, but who wants to try answer that? Magnus? Oh, Magnus, you're on mute. Sorry.
I can start out based on maybe I'm the oldest one, the longest experience, and I entirely hope that there is still need for a lot of new improvements. And there's a lot of unsolved questions to be highlighted. And we don't have, as I mentioned before, ag in Sweden is a very, very small market. It have less than 1% of the GDP. The interest of local money to be invested in this is very small. So if we can utilize what have been invented in bigger markets or other parts of the world, we are more than interested.
So there is a need, but you need to find the special area where the need can be met by your solution. So another question that came in, I think a couple of questions around that were about regulations and standards, and so how important is sustainability when talking to customers and potential partners? How important is to bake that into your solution when having conversations with Swedish players? Who wants to take that?
I think, sorry, I didn't raise my hand, but I can go for it. I think it is very important because it's a political priority as well. So some of the support from a national level will go into sustainability, both nationally and from the EU. So I think one should really emphasize that and consider that, and also not forget that sustainability is also about resilience and competitiveness. So you know, if you can present a solution that takes this into consideration, I think then you have a strong case on the Swedish market and in other markets as well, probably.
Does anyone want to add anything on that? Otherwise, we go to the other question that is about. I think it has something to do with the business culture that we also mentioned during the initial presentations by Jenny. How would you say, from a cultural point of view, Swedish companies are willing to cooperate, engage in relationships with foreign providers outside the European Union from a cultural standpoint, and how much work do you think is important that goes into that, understanding the local business culture? Does anyone want to take that? Ansi?
Okay, so I'm all about culture, so why not? So I think this is super important, and it's important no matter what market you're entering to understand the difference in culture. But that doesn't mean that because Sweden is a small country, we're also very used to cooperating with other countries. We've been doing trade and business with other countries since forever. So therefore, we don't shy away from it, but it's important to also be aware of cultural differences and try to even those out a bit. So I think that we've all mentioned during this conversation, you know, that transparency, trust, calmness, like trying to show proof and not do pitch slapping or sales pitches that will not win people over. I also saw a question on, you know, like, are there test beds? Can I trial things? Can I get into the market? Yes, there are. So in the report, we have stated that as well. And that is also a great way to get to know the culture a bit, because as you do those tests on the test beds that RISE, for instance, provides in Sweden, which is a governmental research agency that we have, then you also get to know what are Swedes like to do business with and try that out. So engage early and that would help you.
Wonderful. That was a good way to close off this discussion. A good I guess lesson for us to engage early, and most of all, I guess, homework to read the report when it comes out. So we'll make sure to send the recording as well as the report in a follow-up email to all of you that have registered to this webinar, and so that should give you the possibility to watch the recording again and get any additional insights. But with having said that, I want to thank Jenny, Ansi, Cecilia, Magnus for participating in the discussion and also engaging in the report. It was extremely interesting to hear your contributions. And then to everyone that has joined the event today, thank you very much for taking the time. And you'll hear from us soon with the follow-up to this discussion. But for now, thank you very much, and please have a lovely continuation to your day. Thank you.